My dad died. At his funeral, I discovered a twin brother I never knew I had, and that was just the beginning. My father died on a Thursday. On Saturday, as they lowered his coffin into the earth, a man with my face stood across the grave and smiled. The phone call came at 3:12 a.m. I was awake, of course. I've always had trouble sleeping, but that night it was different. There was a weight in the air, something I couldn't name but couldn't ignore either. When I saw my mother's name glowing on the screen, I already knew. "He's gone," she said. Just that. No tears, no wavering. Just 3 words that wrapped my childhood in a velvet-lined box and buried it for good. I sat there in the dark, listening to my wife's soft breathing beside me. Elaine had always loved my father, maybe more than I ever did. I didn't wake her. Instead, I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of scotch, and stared out the window until the sky turned the color of an old Bruce. The funeral was in Kingston, where I grew up, a quiet town that smelled of river water and secrets. I hadn't been back in years. My visits had dwindled after Mom and Dad divorced. He stayed in the house. She moved to a condo on the edge of town and learned to love yoga and Sauvignon Blanc. I told myself it was logistics, work, life. Truth was, I didn't know how to talk to my father anymore. After he retired, something in him changed. He became distant, like a man protecting a border I wasn't allowed to cross. Elaine came with me. She always came, even when I said she didn't have to. That was her way, quietly loyal, even when I didn't deserve it. At the church, people spoke in hushed tones, like his death was a scandal. Maybe to some of them, it was. My father had been a lawyer, the kind people either loved or feared, sometimes both. He won cases he shouldn't have and lost ones that should have been easy. He had a gift for seeing the cracks in people. They buried him in the family plot. It was a gray morning, heavy with drizzle, and the priest's voice sounded like a lullaby for ghosts. I stood at the head of the grave, flanked by old clients, bitter cousins, and one ex-wife who didn't cry. Then I saw him. Across the grave, behind a cluster of strangers, stood a man. Mid-40s. Average height. Ash blonde hair. Black coat. Nothing special except the face. My face. The same eyes, same jaw. Even the slight tilt of the head, like we both had trouble believing what we saw. He smiled. Not kindly. It was a smile that knew something I didn't. I don't remember the rest of the service. I don't remember the drive to the reception or the dry sandwiches or the way Elaine kept looking at me, waiting for me to say something. I just kept replaying that moment in my head, like a scratched record, the man with my face, smiling across the grave. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, turning over possibilities. A look-alike. A cruel prank. Or something worse. I didn't tell Elaine. She would have tried to explain it away, and I didn't want it explained. I wanted the truth. So the next morning, I went back to the cemetery. Not for him, for me. I needed to stand there again, in the daylight, and see if it had really happened. Maybe he'd be there again. Maybe he was waiting. He wasn't. But something else was. A woman in a red coat stood near the grave, looking down at the flowers. She turned as I approached. Late 50s, well put together. Eyes sharp as glass. "You're Charles," she said. Not a question. I nodded slowly. "And you are?" She smiled. "I'm someone who knew your father. Very well." I don't know why, but I didn't like the way she said it. Like she was daring me to ask more. "I saw someone here yesterday," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Looked like me." She tilted her head. "Ah, yes. I thought you might." I stared at her. "Who is he?" She didn't answer right away. Just looked at me like she was weighing something. Then she said, "You should come with me." There's a moment in every man's life when he knows he's standing at the edge of something irreversible. This was mine. I could have turned around, gone back to the hotel, pretended none of it happened. But I didn't. I followed her. She drove a gray Lexus, clean but not new. We didn't speak much. I watched the town slide past the window at the hardware store with the wooden rooster, the bridge where I had my first kiss, the old school that still smelled like chalk and shame. Finally, we pulled into the parking lot of a retirement home on the west side. Rosehill Manor, the sign read, in elegant cursive. Inside, the smell of antiseptic hit me like a wall. She signed us in, nodded to the nurse, and led me down a corridor to a small lounge with floral curtains and too many chairs. He was there, sitting by the window, reading a book. He looked up as we entered, and this time he didn't smile. Just closed the book, set it on the table, and stood. We faced each other in silence. "You're real," I said. He nodded. "So are you." The woman stepped between us. "Charles, meet David. Your brother." I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was the only thing I could do without screaming. "Twins," I said. "That's impossible." "Fraternal," she said calmly. "Separated at birth. Your father had his reasons." David spoke for the first time. He paid her to keep me hidden. Said it was for the best. For everyone. I looked at her. "And you just went along with it?" "I was 19, she said. I needed the money." And I believed him when he said he'd come back for us. He didn't, David said, flatly. No, she admitted. He didn't. The room tilted slightly. My mouth was dry, heart pounding. Why now? He's dead, David said. And I want what I'm owed. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My mind had locked itself in a small, soundproof room where nothing made sense and nobody was allowed to speak. I stared at him, at David, like he might vanish if I blinked hard enough. He didn't vanish. Instead, he crossed his arms and leaned against the window, like this was all just an inconvenient family reunion. I'm not here to ruin your life, he said, just to claim my part of it. I turned to the woman. And you? What's your role in this circus? She extended a hand. Margot, I was your father's friend. For many years. That word, friend, fell out of her mouth with the delicacy of a loaded gun. I didn't shake her hand. So what? He kept his spare son tucked away like a broken watch in a drawer? For what? Insurance. Margot sighed, the sound tired and practiced. It wasn't like that. Your father didn't plan for any of this. At least, not at first. But he sure as hell maintained it. I snapped. David sat down again, picked up his book, then put it down. He visited once a year. Like clockwork. Brought gifts. Sometimes cash. Never stayed long. Said it was safer that way. For me. And for me. I asked, bitter now. What was I protected from? The trauma of sharing a bedroom? Margot's face softened, just for a second. He said you were delicate. Sensitive. You had health problems as a baby. He didn't want to complicate your recovery. How convenient, I said. My brother gets vanished because I had asthma. David gave me a look. It wasn't asthma, was it? I didn't answer. The truth is, I don't remember much from those early years. Bits and pieces. Oxygen tanks. The sound of machines. My mother crying in the hallway. But I'd gotten better. Grown up. Made a life. All while my father played weekend Santa to his secret son in a retirement home. A life in parallel, just a few streets away. Why come forward now? I asked. What's changed? David leaned forward, elbows on knees. Because I want what's mine. I've got papers. Letters. Bank records. He supported me financially, yes. But he never put me in the will. Of course he didn't. My father's will was dry as toast. Elaine and I had gone over it with his lawyer 2 days after the funeral. House to be sold. Proceeds divided between me and 2 minor charities. A modest fund for my mother, despite the divorce. Nothing unusual. Except now, everything was unusual. You think you can challenge it? I asked. I know I can, David said. You think the courts won't be interested in a hidden son with 40 years of bank transfers and handwritten letters? He wasn't bluffing. I could see it. The calm certainty in his voice. He'd done the homework. I'm not doing this for money, he added. I'm doing this because I exist. And I'm tired of pretending I don't. That stung in a way I didn't expect. Margot rose, smoothing her coat. You'll both need time. I understand. But don't take too long. The estate won't settle itself. She left us there, in that terrible little room that smelled like peppermint and bleach. I stared out the window, watched a nurse wheel an old man past a garden full of fake tulips. David said, You look like him, more than I do. Lucky me, I muttered. Did he ever talk about me? Not once. He nodded, like he'd expected that answer. He called me a mistake. Once. Then corrected himself. Said I was an accident. I was planned, I said. Look how well that turned out. A silence fell between us, heavy and raw. Then, almost as an afterthought, David said, he kept a storage unit. On Chestnut Road. You might want to see it. What's in it? Truth. Or junk. Depends on your angle. That night, back at the hotel, I told Elaine everything. Well, almost everything. I left out the part about the will. I wasn't ready to admit that my inheritance might be contested by a man who had my father's cheekbones and none of his shame. She listened quietly, as she always did, hands folded in her lap. When I finished, she simply said, And how do you feel? Like I've walked into someone else's life. She nodded. You want me to come to the storage unit with you? No. This one's mine. The next morning, I drove out to Chestnut Road. The storage place was one of those sad, beige facilities lined with roll-up doors and gilt. I gave the clerk my name, showed ID, and signed a release form. Unit 314. I stood in front of it for a while before unlocking it. I half expected to find bones or a confession letter taped to a clown doll. Instead, I found boxes. Dozens of them. All labeled in my father's handwriting. C. 1979. Photos Margot. Legal briefs sealed. David private. I went for that last one. Inside were envelopes. Some opened, some not. Birth certificates. School reports. Old drawings. One photo, crumpled at the edges, showed my father holding a baby I didn't recognize. He looked young, proud, exhausted. I sat on the cold concrete floor and read through the letters. Most were mundane. Updates on school, health, request for money. But one stood out. Dated April 1994. Charles is doing better. Doctors say he might live a normal life. It's a relief, but it complicates things. I've already missed too much with David, but if I bring him in now, the damage will be irreversible. I have to choose. Again, no signature, but it was his writing. No doubt. The weight of it landed squarely in my chest. My father had framed it like a sacrifice. Like choosing between us was noble. But he didn't choose. He avoided, hid, built walls and buried truths. Back at the hotel, I found Elaine reading by the window. I handed her the photo. He loved him, I said. She looked at the picture, then at me. Did he love you? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. Instead, I picked up the hotel pen and a notepad and wrote 3 words. We need to talk. Tomorrow, I would call the lawyer. And then, I would call my brother. It's strange how quickly your life can become a legal question. I spent the morning with father's lawyer, a man named Giles who wore the same tie every day of the week. Monday was green. Thursday was maroon. Today, Friday, was navy blue, stiff as irony. I handed him a folder. Letters, receipts, the photo. He flipped through them without surprise. You said he claims to be your twin? He is. Fraternal. We did a DNA test yesterday. I hadn't told Elaine. Some truths are best served cold and solo. He matches me. And our father. Giles nodded once, as if checking something off in a private list of expected betrayals. That complicates things. No kidding. He tapped his pen against the desk, a slow, rhythmic metronome. Your father's will makes no mention of another child. The estate was divided based on the assumption that you were the sole heir. And now, Giles said, we wait for the storm. The storm arrived by courier at 3 p.m. A formal notice of intent to challenge the will, signed by David Thompson. Yes, he had kept our father's surname, and his attorney, someone named Iris Langdon. Elaine read the letter silently, her lips pressed into a line. He's serious. Yes. Are you going to fight him? I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't asking as my wife. She was asking as someone who had watched me get cracked open like a walnut. Wouldn't you? I don't know, she said. He didn't ask for your life. Just a piece of it. That piece was mine. Was it? She said softly. That one landed hard. 2 days later, I met David at a diner just outside town. The kind with fake leather booths and a menu laminated so long ago the edges had curled into themselves. He was already there, drinking black coffee, a notebook open beside him. You came, he said. I'm not here to hug it out, I warned. Good. I hate hugs. I slid into the booth, ordered tea, because I needed something weak to contrast with the man across from me. He tapped his notebook. I'm not backing down. You should know that. And I'm not handing over half of everything without a fight. Then let's not waste each other's time. Let's talk terms. That surprised me. Terms. He opened the notebook to a list. I don't want the house. I don't want your name. I don't want family dinners or awkward Christmas cards. Nice to hear. I want what I should have had. The education fund. A trust. Something that says I wasn't just a clerical error in a dead man's conscience. How much? $250,000. I nearly choked on my tea. That's generous of you. It's fair, he said, without blinking. That's about what you got in assets, excluding the house and car. I did the math. Of course he did. I sat back. And if I say no, then we go to court. And I win. Eventually. It wasn't arrogance. It was fact. We both knew it. I rubbed my eyes. You could have asked for half. Why didn't you? He paused. Because I'm not interested in vengeance. Just acknowledgement. Money's a measure, not the prize. I studied him. Same eyes. Same mouth. A different man. You ever wonder what it would have been like? I asked. If he'd raised us both? Every day, he said. But wondering doesn't rewrite the past. It just slows the future. Back home, Elaine was reading again. She always did that when life became unbearable, escaped into fiction. I envied her that. I think I'm going to settle, I said. She looked up, eyes unreadable. Good. That's it. I'm proud of you, she said. For being the bigger person. I laughed bitterly. Feels more like I'm the smaller one. Sharing a stage I thought I owned. Maybe that's the point, she said. You never owned it. You just didn't know who else was in the play. The next morning, I drafted a proposal. Giles reviewed it, said it was unconventional, but defensible, which is lawyer speak for this won't destroy you. David accepted without changes. We agreed to meet at the lawyer's office to sign the paperwork. Elaine came with me, a quiet, steady presence I didn't deserve. Margot came too, not because she had a stake in it, but because she lived this secret longer than either of us. I want to see it in, she said. David signed first. I watched his hand move, saw the strange familiarity in his knuckles, the way he tapped the pen twice after. A tick I thought was mine alone. When it was my turn, I hesitated. The page swam in front of me. Not out of doubt, but grief. Not for the money, or even for my father. For the life that might have been, and never was. I signed. Later, David and I stood in the parking lot, awkward in the way only blood relatives can be after a legal proceeding. So, he said, this is it. Not quite. I reached into my jacket and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a key. What's this? The storage unit. It's yours now. I took what I needed. He took it slowly. Thanks. You said you weren't here for revenge. I believe you. David nodded. You're not what I expected, Charles. Neither are you. A beat passed. Then he offered a hand. We shook. And then we didn't say goodbye, because goodbye would have implied something ended. Instead, we walked in opposite directions, two men who shared a face, a father, and 40 years of silence. I thought that would be the end of it, the signing, the handshake, the shared nod of resignation. Neat, clinical closure. But grief, like inheritance, never splits cleanly. 2 weeks after the settlement, I received a package. No return address. No note. Inside, a leather-bound journal with a class that had long since lost its strength, and a photograph, my father and Margot, younger than I'd ever seen them. They were sitting on a blanket in a park, laughing. Behind them, two toddlers. One reaching for the other. Twins. The journal was my father's. His name was scrawled inside the cover in that sharp, unforgiving handwriting of his. I opened it with the hesitation of someone handling something radioactive. The first entry was dated June 1982. Margot cried again today. David has a fever. Charles won't sleep unless he's held. I'm splitting in half trying to be whole. And all I keep thinking is, why didn't anyone tell me that love would make me a coward? I read the entire thing that night. 67 entries, written across a decade. Some short, some rambling, all bleeding. He had loved us in his way. Not well, not wisely, but fully. The kind of love that calcifies when the world tells you to choose, and you do badly. He never forgave himself for choosing me. Or maybe for not choosing David. The entries hinted at guilt, a slow poison. At some point, he stopped visiting David entirely. Not because he stopped caring, but because he couldn't face the weight of his own design. I watched him from the car today. He doesn't know I was there. I just needed to see him walk. To know he still did. I showed Elaine the journal. She read it silently, her thumb brushing each page like it might erase the pain if she pressed hard enough. He was broken, she said, finally. Aren't we all? Yes, she agreed. But he knew he was. That's something. I didn't respond. I was too busy wondering whether knowing your own failure made it better or worse. That weekend, I visited my mother. She lived in a sleek apartment with too much granite and too little memory. I brought the photo and the journal. Sat across from her on the white couch she bought after the divorce. Did you know? I asked. She didn't even flinch. About David? Yes. She poured tea. No sugar. Just the bitterness. I found a letter once. Your father left it in the desk. It said he had made arrangements. At first, I thought it was another woman. I was half right. You didn't ask. Oh, I asked. He denied everything. Then he cried. I'd never seen him cry before. That's when I knew it was true. And you stayed married? For a while, she said. Then I left. Not because of David. Because your father stopped looking me in the eye. We drank in silence. The kind that hums with unspoken truths. He wasn't a monster, she added. He just couldn't live with all his choices in the same room. Later that night, David called. I got the journal, he said. I figured you would. A pause. Then, he wrote about you. A lot. Same for you. I always wondered if I was a mistake. You weren't, I said. You were a secret. There's a difference. Another pause. What do we do now? That was the question, wasn't it? We live, I said, and decide if we want each other in it. He didn't answer right away, but he didn't hang up either. Progress. A few days later, I was cleaning out the attic when I found a box of my own childhood photos. I hadn't looked at them in years, smiling faces and bad lighting. Birthdays I barely remembered. One stood out. My 3rd birthday. Cake. Balloons. A red wagon. And next to me, a blur. A small shape. Cut off at the edge. I stared at it for a long time. Had he been there? Did I already know, somewhere deep in the unreliable corners of childhood memory? Was that what the night terrors were about? The shadow I always imagined in the hallway? It didn't matter. Or maybe it did. I couldn't tell anymore. A week later, Margot invited me for tea. Her house was modest, filled with overgrown plants and the smell of lemon. She poured with the precision of someone used to quiet company. I'm dying, she said, without ceremony. I blinked. What? Cancer. Lungs. I never smoked, so the doctors are especially smug about it. Like I got what I didn't pay for. I'm sorry. She waved a hand. Don't be. I've had a good life. Complicated, but good. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. She slid an envelope across the table. This is for you. From your father. He gave it to me 5 years ago. Told me to wait until after he was gone. And until you knew. Knew what? Everything. Inside was a single-page letter. Charles, if you're reading this, then I've already failed at everything I didn't have the courage to face in person. You were my anchor. David was my regret. I kept you apart because I was afraid of what being whole would cost. I loved you both. But I wasn't enough man to love you honestly. Forgive me if you can. Hate me if you must. But don't become me. Don't carry this forward. He's your brother, not your burden. No signature. Just the smudge of his thumb at the bottom, where the ink had bled. I sat with that for a long time. Later that evening, I called David again. There's a cafe on Elm. Corner of 7th. Sunday at 2. You sure? No, I said. But come anyway. I arrived 10 minutes early. The cafe on Elm was quiet for a Sunday, soft jazz, clinking mugs, the occasional hiss of steam from behind the counter. I chose a table by the window. 2 chairs. No safety nets. David showed up 5 minutes late. I watched him walk in like a man checking for traps, which, all things considered, was probably wise. He sat across from me without a word. Just nodded once, the way soldiers do in war films before they go over the trench. I read the letter, I said. He didn't ask which one. He was a coward, I continued. But at least he knew it. David stirred his coffee, slowly. Knowing doesn't change what he did. No. But it explains why. That hung between us like smoke. I hated you, you know, he said, looking out the window. Before I met you. I made up this whole image in my head. Perfect house, perfect parents. You probably had a dog named Justice. We had a cat named Muffin, I said. He hated everyone. David smiled. A real one, this time. Figures. We sat in silence, sipping our drinks, 2 men orbiting the same Dead Star. Then I said, I want to try. He raised an eyebrow. Try what? This. Us. I don't know what it looks like. I don't even know if it'll work. But I'd like to find out. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you sure? Because I'm not some half-formed version of you. I'm a full disaster in my own right. Perfect, I said. You'll fit right in. That was a year ago. We started small Sunday breakfasts, long emails, trading stories like used books. We didn't always get along. He hated my taste in music. I thought he drove like a man late to every funeral. But we kept showing up. And that mattered more than anything. Elaine took to him faster than I did. He laughs like you, she said once. But with less apology. My mother took longer. There were tears. Sharp words. Regret she didn't ask more questions back then. But eventually she invited him over. Made his favorite dessert, without ever asking what it was. Mothers have a way of knowing. Margot died 6 months after that last cup of tea. David and I stood side by side at her memorial, listening to strangers talk about her kindness, her stubbornness, her impossible lasagna. She left him a letter. And a photograph of the 3 of them, the only one in existence. He had it framed. As for my father, we never put up a new headstone. But we did change the plaque. It now reads, Edward Thompson, father of 2 sons. Loved him perfectly. It's more honest than he ever managed in life. Last week, David invited me over for dinner. I made spaghetti, he said, grinning. Don't get excited. It's from a jar. I brought wine. Elaine brought brownies. He introduced us to his girlfriend, a sharp-eyed woman named Lena who asked me over dessert. So what's it like, finding out your life was a lie? And I said, without thinking, strangely, comforting. At least now the holes make sense. She raised her glass. To the holes. We drank to that. I still visit the storage unit sometimes. Most of it's gone now. David took what mattered to him, and we donated the rest. But I kept 1 box. Just one. Inside it, my father's journal, the twin photo, and the envelope he left me. Not because I need to reread them, but because they remind me what silence costs. Sometimes I catch myself in the mirror and think I see David. Not because we look so much alike, but because we carry the same weight now. The same jagged legacy. But we also carry something else. Choice. He's not my burden. He never was. He's my brother. And for the first time, that word means what it should. Thanks for sticking around and listening to my story. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss more true life stories just like this one.